So good afternoon. My name's Alicia Huber, and I will be moderating this session, Growing Sustainability Initiatives, Planting the Seed of Academic Libraries as Partners. Before I introduce our speakers, I have a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded, so please stay muted unless you are invited to speak. If you have any questions, please put them in chat as I will be moderating the chat. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers. From SUNY Oneonta, we have librarians Sarah Rhodes, Jean-Paul Orgeron, and Heather Stalter. And from Binghamton University, we have librarians Neyda Gilman and Jennifer Embree. Without further ado, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Thanks, Alicia. So we wanted to start off with a land acknowledgement. So although we are operating in a virtual environment, we wanted to take the time to acknowledge the Indigenous people whose traditional territories our two libraries reside upon. Both Binghamton and Oneonta reside in the Haudenosaunee Nation, specifically Oneida and Onondaga. We acknowledge the past and present members of these nations and honor with gratitude both the land and the tribes. We also wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the work and sustainability that Indigenous people do and historically have done, as it is often neglected and overlooked. Sherry Mitchell, in her chapter Indigenous Prophecy and Mother Earth in the book All We Can Save, states that in recent years, many scientists have realized that they are just now discovering what Indigenous people have long known. For instance, archaeologists and environmental scientists have found Indigenous marine management sites that predate European settlement. They had believed marine management to have come only after European influence, despite information to the contrary that was provided by Indigenous peoples. Scientists are now gaining valuable information regarding changes in the local ecosystem from the Indigenous peoples in some coastal areas. Acknowledging the past and present is important, but it is not enough, and we must take actions moving forward. We believe we should embrace Sherry Mitchell's charge for non-Indigenous people to stand with Indigenous people to ensure that Indigenous people's lands, waters, and ways of life are not further eroded by government and industrial intrusion. We can support this charge in many ways, including promoting Indigenous work and sustainability through our collections. We hope that you will all take time after this presentation to identify ways that you can support Indigenous people and their work. So sustainability and libraries go together like peanut butter and jelly. If you're unfamiliar with the UN's 17 Sustainability Development Goals, then I highly recommend checking them out. We'll share the link at the end of the presentation. They highlight how sustainability touches all facets of our lives, and there are many ways for libraries to practice and participate in sustainability that extends beyond collections and the physical building, and we can use those goals to help inform us. In today's presentation, we're going to highlight a few ways that our libraries have practiced sustainability and share some tips to get started in your own library.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to kind of giving a brief introduction to our two campuses. So at SUNY Binghamton, we're located in South Central New York. It's often referred to as the Southern Tier of New York as well. And we're kind of like a mid-level to bordering on large-scale institution. We have about 1,400 or 14,000 undergrad students and about 4,000 graduate students. And we were recently made into a R1 research institution in 2019, and we're also a doctoral granting institution. So we have 4 different library locations on our campus as well. We have our main library, which is called Bartle, and it houses all of our humanities, fine arts, and social sciences collections, as well as a few others. We also have a science library location that is in the science complex here at Binghamton. And you'll hear a lot about the science library because that's where both Neyda and I work, and that's where a lot of our sustainability work is taking place. We also have a downtown center, which we call the UDC, which supports the university's College of Community and Public Affairs. So those in collections include social work, education, public administration. And we also most recently have a health sciences library that's being established in our new health sciences complex, which is going to support the School of Pharmacy and the School of Nursing. And so most recently, we established what we are calling a sustainability hub in our science library. And the goal of the sustainability hub is to be a physical and virtual space that promotes campus research and pedagogy while also providing information, resources, education, programming, and outreach on any real sustainability related topics on the campus and in the local community. So Neyda and I created this because Binghamton doesn't actually have an Office of Sustainability or any kind of centralized sustainability work. There's a lot of really great work being done by individual committees and student organizations, but we thought it would be really nice to have a more centralized location where all of this information could be found, because it's a little bit difficult to find due to there being a lack of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And now I'm going to hand it over to SUNY Oneonta.
Hi, everyone. SUNY Oneonta is located in Oneonta, New York. Oneonta, for those of you who don't know, is in what we call central New York, about halfway between Binghamton and Albany. At our school, we have about 6,700 students. We're principally a mid-size 4-year public college, but we also have several master's programs. Our institution really thrives on 3 core values that support the college's mission. So those values are inclusivity, service, and sustainability. And our college's take on sustainability is the following. It not only is concerned with financial and environmental responsibility, but it's also seen as a force that keeps each of our students moving forward, moving towards their individual calling, whatever that may be. Given that the college has this core value of sustainability, you'll be hearing a bit more in the presentation about the Office of Sustainability that the college has. Given this core value of sustainability and our Office of Sustainability on our campus, the library founded a sustainability team. In fact, that's due to our great Sarah Rhodes, founded a sustainability team, which we work in tandem, not only with the college's core value, but with the Office of Sustainability in furthering their goals. Thank you.
When doing sustainability work at your own campus, one of the keys to success is partnerships outside the library. And Jen will get us started with partnerships at Binghamton.
All right, so one of the first student organizations that Binghamton partnered with is called 0 Hour. It's a climate activism group, and it's a national organization and that has different student chapters. And one of the reasons that we actually started really started our contacts with them was because the Science Library in general was thinking about ways in which we can bring more students and more engagement from student clubs into the Science Library. So we reached out to a few different science clubs or clubs that had like a science focus to see if they'd be interested in partnering with us and coming into the Science Library to use our space. And 0 Hour was one of the clubs that was interested. So they got back to us and we worked with them to create a new meeting policy in order to be able to have them meet in our library, since we hadn't actually offered any service like that previously. And one of the parts of the agreement was that any student club that would meet in our space, we would partner together and do at least one event a semester related to something sciencey. And so we were able to get the contract set in the fall of 2019. So the club started meeting in our space in the spring of 2020, but of course COVID happened, so they only met a few times. But this initial partnership led to a really long and fruitful relationship with 0 Hour. So we've partnered with them on multiple events since then virtually. And one of their students, Mona Porter, wrote us an amazing letter of recommendation for a grant that Neyda and I received later for supporting sustainability work in the libraries. And so Neyda is going to start talking a little bit more about our other student partnerships.
Yeah, so about the same time that we started conversations with 0 Hour, we also started conversations with the Bee Club. And I think they're probably, besides 0 Hour, they're one of the primary student clubs that we've continued to work with. The representative from that club also was a representative from the food co-op and led to some great ideas and other connections with faculty. One of the things that came out of that is a pollinator garden that we actually just planted this spring, supposed to happen last spring. And the university has now become a B Campus USA campus through our work with the B Club. The Out in STEM group is a group that we were actually introduced to through the LGBTQ Center when we started talking about a program, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit, but it was really exciting to get introduced to. They're also a new group, a group that we hadn't reached out to yet since we were primarily focusing on sustainability related student groups. And then the New York Public Interest Research Group, there's 2 student groups related to the food co-op. And then there's other sustainability related student groups that we haven't worked a whole lot with yet, but we've had discussions with them. And starting in the fall, they're going to be putting some of their information and displays up in our sustainability hub. And they're all been very excited about working with us in the future on events and programs. So, Sarah?
Nice. So I'll talk a little bit more about this partnership later on in our presentation, but one of the student clubs that we partnered with a lot pre-pandemic was the Revival of Apparel Club, or RAC, that's at SUNY Oneonta. So the RAC runs the on-campus thrift store. They're quite active, so being able to partner with them was really exciting for us. And I'll talk more about what we did with them in a couple slides later on.
Okay, so moving on to partnerships with campus entities. At Binghamton, there are multiple different campus entities that we partnered with and a lot of the program that we offered over the past year. And part of this comes out of a grant that Neyda and I received over the summer from, it's a new pilot program from ALA, and it's called Resilient Communities, Libraries Responding to Climate Change. And it basically provided support and funding for any kind of programming related to climate change. And they really wanted to focus on community engagement. And so they required at least one partnership with a community entity, and it could be a campus community or a local community. But Neyda and I kind of wanted to partner with as many people as we could with all of the events that we did. And so here are just some of the ones that we partnered with. The Multicultural Resource Center, we did a food drive with them that we'll talk about a little bit more later. And that also brought in the food pantry on campus. And the Q Center, or the LGBTQ Center, we did a film screening and a film discussion with them. And we also have partnered with lots of individual faculty members. For instance, we got these beautiful posters that are now in our library that you can see in the picture through one faculty member that wanted to highlight her students' research, and a lot of faculty members that help us on serving on lots of different panel sessions and other events that we do. And I'll hand it over to Oneonta now.
Thanks, Jen. So since we have an Office of Sustainability on campus, a lot of our campus entity partnerships are kind of connected together. So for example, we only have one person working in the Office of Sustainability at the moment, and that is our sustainability coordinator, Rachel Kornhauser. So she wears different hats and will sometimes act in the capacity of the office or as the coordinator. And we've worked with her in both capacities. I currently serve, and Heather has served in the past, on the President's Advisory Council on Sustainability, or PACS, which is an elected group on campus that does a lot of work campus-wide with sustainability. We've partnered with them on a few events, and we've also partnered with the Student Learning Center for a sustainability-themed event, and we'll talk more in detail on those partnerships a little later on when we go into programs.
All right, I'm going to talk a little bit about our community partnerships. So these partnerships actually came out of that grant that Jen mentioned, just because that was one of the requirements of it. And I think it was a great opportunity to reach out to them, to have kind of an excuse to reach out to them. And they've all been amazing to work with, and we look forward to working with them more. But we just want to introduce them here really quickly. We'll talk about the programming we did with them soon. So the Volunteers Improving Neighborhood Environment, or VINES, is a community organization that focuses on gardening. They have multiple community gardens in the area, and they host various gardening related programming and events. Broome County Public Library, obviously it's great to work with another library, and they're the largest public library in our area. And we've also had a few discussions with the Vestal Public Library, which is nearby the university. And the New York Nest is the Network for Sustainable Tomorrow. And I'm just going to quote from their website because I thought it was the best way to explain what they did. But they're a community-based network of programs working towards social, environmental, and economic justice and equity in our region. So basically, they just do a lot of work promoting sustainability in the community. I first became aware of them through one of their workshops on geothermal, for example. Okay, next slide.
Heather, you're still muted.
Thank you. Yes. Partnering with people outside the library is crucial, but it is only the first step. You're just planting the seeds. The next part is creating action from those partnerships and doing things like programming. So Jen and Neyda will kick us off with some of their programs at Binghamton.
All right, so I'm going to start. So these are just a quick sampling of all of the programming that we're going to talk about in a little bit. We did a lot of programming through the grant that we got, but there was also other programs that we were just really interested in, or someone came to us and said that they were interested in. And so there's a lot of really great things that we were able to do. And I have we have a link right here in our slides that will take you to a page that has all these events as well as like the streams of them. So if you're ever curious to kind of check it out yourself, you can definitely do that. But I can go ahead and start with the next slide on our first programming event. So our first program was working with Vines, the organization that Neyda was just speaking about that does a lot of gardening and community urban gardening in our area and downtown Binghamton and just in general in Broome County. And we wanted to work with them on a series specifically associated with seeds and seed saving. So when we first originally talked to them, we came up with a 3-part series that we wanted to do. So in February, like before planting season, we were going to do kind of a why seed saving matters and why it's so important and its cultural and environmental impacts. That was a panel session that we set up to do. And then the second workshop was going to happen right before planting season. It happened in April. And it was more like a seed saving for beginners workshop. So what to think about when you are interested in seed saving, how to prepare before the planting and growing season. And our third workshop is yet to happen. It's going to happen in September, and it's going to be what happens after harvest. So like how to actually start your seed saving, what are the most common types of fruits and vegetables that people really want to save their seeds from and how to kind of do that most effectively. But these workshops have been really, really popular. They've been really successful. The first one that we did, the Why I Save Seeds, the cultural, environmental, and global impact of seed saving, was extremely popular. We had almost 50 people in attendance for that. And I list the panelists and contributors here. Junior Beauvais is a agricultural technology practitioner and advocate, and he's based in Haiti. And then we also had Anandi Premlal, who is an agroecological educator, and Valerie Embree, who was one of our faculty and members from campus. She's the director of the Undergraduate Research Center and Office of External Scholarships at Binghamton. And then Lisa Blednick, who is a local farmer. She runs a completely horse-powered farm, and she's also internationally renowned as a seed expert. So she does a lot of amazing work with seeds, and she's partners with Vines very frequently on her programming. And so the pictures here you can see from our flyers, but I also like to point out the picture of Junior here too. He actually built a seed bank in his local town of Fondua in Haiti that supplies black beans, corns, and pigeon peas to local farmers. And it's been an incredible success. And so that's just the area that he's working in right now. So I love to share that because he was like, there were so many questions and people were so interested in his work during that panel session. So the next event, if we can go to the next slide that we did, was a Wikipedia Editathon for amplifying environmental justice. So we partnered with 0 Hour, the student chapter, as well as the Broome County Public Library for this event. And it was basically like all Wikipedia editathons that we do is focusing on editing different types of pages. We wanted to focus on environmental justice related pages with a particular emphasis on amplifying BIPOC leaders and efforts in these movements and doing this kind of work. And so the students from 0 Hour were in charge of conducting the trainings during the event, and kind of they really ran the event. The librarians that were involved were more passive support. And this attendance, as you can see, wasn't the greatest, but I do think we were able to accomplish some impactful work. And in the future, I think we'd like to continue to do Wikipedia editathons, but they seem to be things that lend themselves better to an in-person environment. We're hoping they'll be more successful in the future when we can like buy snacks and do more one-on-one work if needed. And the 0 Hour attendees were really actually very like happy with the event. They kind of were thinking about ways in which they can turn it into like a monthly event for their own club, which we thought was really interesting. So we've explored other ways to kind of increase engagement with an event like this in the future. And then the next event, if we can go to the next slide, was an Earth Day panel that we did for Earth Day on biodiversity and climate change. So this was probably the most academic-y focused event that we did this past year. And we did an Earth Day panel for the first time last year for the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And that was focused on looking at how sustainability education has evolved since Earth Day was originally instated back in 1970. And one of the first panelists that we invited to participate in that original panel was Julian Shepard, who is in this picture here. He's the one on the left. The one on the right is Dick Andrus, and they both started working at Binghamton in the early 1970s and teaching about sustainability and environmental conservation. And they're both really, really beloved on this campus. Dick Andrus unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago, but Julian Shepard was really excited. He really enjoyed the panel that we did last year. And so when he heard that Neyda and I received a grant, he reached out wanting to be involved in any programming that we would do in the future. So he gave us the idea for the Biodiversity and Climate Change Earth Day panel. And so we hosted that, and it was also very popular. It was focused on looking at how biodiversity is being affected by climate change and how folks could kind of mitigate their impacts on their surrounding environments. So both these events were really popular. The one from last year was attended by over 50 people. This one was 35. And we'd really like to make it an annual thing that we do every year and do a panel session that's on a different topic related to this and invite faculty and students and staff from campus. So now I'm going to pass over to Neyda to finish us off on the program we did at Binghamton.
Got a bit distracted because I see the question about the SDGs and our sustainability programming. And I just want to answer that real fast, sorry. It's something that we've talked about a lot and we kind of have plans for in the future, but we haven't explicitly done it yet in any of these presentations. But it's something I think we're both very interested in, and we kind of have plans for the future. We just weren't able to make it explicit in any of these. But to move on to a couple more programming examples, Jen mentioned this film discussion and screening. So this we got the rights to film the screen through that ALA grant. And I honestly think it was very interesting, but it was probably one of the most complicated events we hosted. So we started out by working with the Q Center, and their director notified us about, like I mentioned, the new student group, OSTEM. So we were working with student group, the Q Center director, and then the initial idea was to to do a virtual screening and then have a discussion after the fact, which we knew would be kind of, not the best in the virtual environment, but it's what we were going to try to do. The Q Center director had some really great ideas to possibly interview the film director before the screening, before the screening and discussion, kind of put it out on social media, kind of as a way to build excitement for it. And so that idea, and she also had the idea to bring in somebody associated with the film during the film discussion. Both excellent ideas. Bringing in the OSTEM was an excellent idea as well. It led to a lot though. So we were able to accomplish it all, but it was a lot of work, a lot of going back and forth. You can see some screenshots of the interview with Vanessa and the discussion with Luz. There's another link here on this page that goes directly to information about this event where you can watch that interview and the discussion session of the screening. I will say that while this is probably the most complicated event that we put on, we chose this film because it was the easiest film for us to screen. So if it's something that you're interested in, I highly recommend, and there's links on that guide, reaching out to the film director, Vanessa, and trying to set up a screening for it. She's probably more than willing to do that. So we'll talk more about some of the obstacles in a little bit, but I just want to emphasize, I think one of the obstacles we ran across here was an obstacle we were all facing last year with everything having to be virtual. I think we would have had higher attendance if we were able to have an in-person screening, provide popcorn and snacks and make the discussion a little more personal being together. But I think it went pretty well as it was being virtual. Okay, next. Okay, so this is the food drive one. So we worked with the Multicultural Resource Center to do this. We initially reached out to them wanting to do a session on, I forget what on race and climate change, I think was the intersection between those two. But Richie, who was our contact at the Multicultural Resource Center, got really excited about doing a food drive, and we loved the idea. So basically what we ended up doing, it was a 6-week drive, and it was a social media kind of drive that we did. So we created these posts that we went mostly on Instagram. We also did it on Facebook and Twitter that were focused on something to do with climate change and food insecurity. And again, if you go to our link that we had shared previously, there is a page for just the food drive where you can see all of the posts that we made. But some of the post examples were, we did a general announcement, obviously. Post focus on food waste. We talked about college students and food insecurity, the SNAP or Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, food insecurity and local assistance, like places people could go locally. We talked about food insecurity and growing food at home. And then we talked about global change in food insecurity on both the global level as well as the individual level. It was really successful. We got over 200 items donated. We're not sure how much monetary donations were made because it was really hard to track that, like how much was from this and how much was just the food bank would have got normally. But they were very, very thankful. They were great to work with, and we hope to continue working with the MRC and the food pantry in the future. Next. Yeah, thanks. So the last one we're going to talk about from Binghamton is this panel session, Living Sustainability One Day at a Time. So this initially started as a collaboration with the Broome County Public Library. That collaboration kind of fell into mostly them being a panelist, which is great. We had the director of the BCPL, Josias. We had Kate Miller-Cochran from Vines, who we've already talked about, Adam Flint from New York Nest, and then Mona Porter and Sophia Murphy, the two students at the bottom, they were our representatives from Zero Hour. And just to emphasize how great Zero Hour was to work with, initially Mona was going to be the panelist. But then when she started talking to her group about it, Sophia got really interested and was like, can I be a panelist too? I really want to talk about this stuff. I really want to be involved. So that group as a whole was just very excited, really wanted to work with us. And we ended up having two of them join our panelist. We had a list of questions that we shared with the panelists that covered things about their experiences, the importance of living sustainably, tips to live more sustainably, both as students and just as like for the general public. And then we, of course, invited the audience to ask questions for our panelists. And as you can see, this was in the middle of the pandemic. People were getting very sick of Zoom, but we still had 29 attendants, and it was very well received. Okay, thanks. Next slide.
Thanks. So at Oneonta, we had a number of things that we did. One of the first things that I wanted to talk about was our rack DIY series. So as I mentioned earlier, we partnered with the rack pre-pandemic. The partnership began when I bumped into the faculty advisor for the club and said, hey, I was thinking it would be neat to partner up and do a mending workshop and maybe give away mini sewing kits. Would any of the fashion clubs like rack be interested in running it? He laughed and said that he had bought 200 mini sewing kits the year before because he wanted to do something along those lines and just hadn't thought it through yet. So it was kind of perfectly put together and ready to go. So we met with the members of RAC, our sustainability team did, and planned out the initial mending workshop, which we have the flyer for right up here. And we figured out where they could meet in the library to do it. They ended up loving having it in the library so much that we turned it into a DIY series. And we hosted 2 or 3 more before the pandemic hit. So they did some repurposing your denim into clutches and pencil holders and stuff. And we actually had several more on the books for the rest of the academic year, but sadly that didn't happen, obviously, because of the pandemic. And with the pandemic in full swing during the 2020 to 2021 school year, RAC didn't operate. Also, our campus had to kind of very quickly shut down in the fall and go completely virtual. So it kind of put a pause on a lot of things that we had hoped to continue doing. However, we've been in communication with them and they're still really excited about partnering with us again in the future. So we're hoping when they get back to campus in the fall and it's a little bit more normal, we can partner with them again. The next thing that I want to talk about is our sustainable study tips or sustainability study tips event. It's a tongue twister. So for this program, I reached out to our sustainability coordinator, Rachel Kornhauser, and asked if she wanted to put something together talking about study habits and how to do it sustainably. She had the great suggestion of also including our Student Learning Center, which is located in the library, and play off the word sustainability and highlight how learning good study habits is a sustainable learning practice. So we put together a program where we taught participants how to put together a recycled notebook. And while they were putting it together, our 3 offices would interject nuggets of sustainability information related to our area of expertise. Sadly, we had to make them all virtual, even though we were planning on having a small in-person event for the fall 2020. However, they turned out well virtually, and we're excited to do the program again in the upcoming year in person. We've already started kind of talking about how we want to do it in person in the fall. The other programming event that I wanted to share was our Recycling 101. So the sustainability team at our library not only focuses on outward programs for students, but sort of kind of in-house programs for library employees as well. The reason for that is because we believe that sustainability practices need to start from within and be modeled. It's not a good look if we're saying be sustainable, but then we're not really practicing that ourselves. So we put together, in partnership with the sustainability coordinator, a Recycling 101 program. So she held a virtual talk where she shared how to recycle properly. If you don't really know much about recycling, it's actually a huge industry, and there's a lot of things called wish cycling and stuff. So she kind of talked about how to actually recycle properly and where to go on campus and in town to recycle hard to dispose of products like styrofoam. We have a organization in town called the Otsego Reuse Center that's run by the ARC. They will accept styrofoam. They're actually now recycling markers as well. She partners with them a lot for things. We have on campus a lot of stuff that through her office she recycles. So we have plastic cling film. We're collecting bottles and donating the proceeds to the Bug Bee Nursery School. She's collecting all of like razors and toothbrushes and toothpaste tubes and things. So, so she came in and talked with our library staff about different ways to recycle. The other program that we did that I'll talk about briefly is the Green Office Pilot Program. So because of all of our work in sustainability on campus, the operations subcommittee of PAC, so that President's Advisory Council on Sustainability, they reached out to our team, our sustainability team in the library, and asked if we would be willing to pilot their Green Office certification program. So this program is meant to encourage more sustainable workplace habits and practices and celebrate those engaging in this work. The Sustainability Office already has a green room certification for the dorms, so she wanted to put it out to the workplace, so have a green office certification program. So we trialed it as a team for a month, and we shared our feedback with the subcommittee on what went well, what didn't went well. So they're taking that feedback, tweaking the program a little bit, and rolling it out this fall, and giving us some props for that, which we were excited about. Heather?
Yeah, okay. So this summer we are planning a virtual Learn and Share event where we'll invite other library staff to join us for a new take on the classic show and tell, where we're envisioning sharing simple things that we can each do to live a more sustainable life. So this could include anything from, sharing simple tips on reducing food waste, like something as simple as ketchup, to holding up a pair of sneakers that we might have purchased simply because they were made responsibly and sustainably. This particular pair, by the way, is from a place in Brazil called, don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, Cariúma. And we're also, along with this, hoping to have an asynchronous component where we can share tips periodically online. Jean-Paul.
Hi, everyone. Walking is a sustainable activity. I'm a huge advocate. I grew up in an urban area, walking all over the place in my childhood. And Oneonta is very walkable. I'm deeply satisfied that I can walk to work. It's great. So, wanting to build on something that means a lot to me, and as part of the sustainability team here, I thought about an event called Why I Walk. And the more the more we return to campus, and there's more people around, we're planning to host some possibly themed, but just some walks around campus. I think that could be a deeply satisfying activity. It's also deeply satisfying to read about walking. There are many great examples in literature and philosophy about walking, where it sort of goes without saying that the act itself denotes autonomy, endurance, and simplification. I'll note that Frodo and Sam in the Lord of the Rings, they experience the kind of clarity that comes from walking, from an epic journey, right? Had it been undertaken otherwise, then something would likely be missing from that end result. Walking is for spectating. Walking is for enlightenment, seeing the world in a slightly different place. So what we did is, we did this, the library has a blog, and I did this little entry on walking and reading just to sort of, get the ball rolling, as it were. Thank you.
Sometimes you have the best partner and the best idea for a sustainability project, but you still hit some brick walls. So now we'll share some of the obstacles that we've encountered and had to overcome at our own institutions, starting with Jean-Paul for Oneonta.
Yeah, so, when the sustainability team first formed, we thought about greening up our lounge, our staff lounge here in the library. We had noticed that a lot of times when we would have get-togethers, we might be using a lot of paper products, a lot of disposables, and so we had some ideas about bringing in some plates and some flatware and some glasses and bowls and things like that, trying to crowdsource it. We had a bunch of ideas, but sometimes even something as simple as this, you have to. But while people might embrace it in principle, sometimes space like a lounge space is a communal space, and people aren't always going to absolutely agree to changes, even if they seem small and incremental to you. So expect pushback even on small things, but it's important, of course, to listen, show others respect, and try to work through things, perhaps not all at once, right? Sort of gradually get to your goals. Jen?
Yes. So one obstacle that Neyda and I particularly faced, and some of you might be in similar positions, is that there is, like I mentioned before, no official sustainability office on our campus. And so when we needed to find answers to certain things, it just felt sometimes difficult to know where to start or where to go to get answers to questions that we had, or to find out about what is really happening on campus from a centralized place. Like I mentioned before, also, there's a lot of really great things happening, but it was hard to know all of it, what was happening here or there. We'd often hear things that happened after the fact or something like that. So a lot of times Neyda and I felt like we kind of had to forge our own way in creating our own connections and learning more about sustainability and bringing people together. But this obstacle is also an opportunity in it of itself, because without having that centralized office, Neyda and I also had a lot of freedom to kind of do what we wanted and to kind of create this centralized space through our sustainability hub as well. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sarah now, who's going to talk a little bit about the opposite situation.
Yeah, so I put this many sustainability initiatives as an obstacle. I think it's kind of one of those good obstacles to have. And the reason I put it here is that while there are so many awesome things happening on our campus related to sustainability, it does sometimes make it a bit tricky for us to start things. And on occasion, it isn't feasible to partner with the group already doing it because of the way they've set something up. Like I kind of get envious of Jen and Neyda a little bit sometimes with the things they're doing because that's already happening on our campus and we can't necessarily partner with some people. And so I'm just like, oh, it'd be awesome to do those things. But it's really awesome to see so many things happening on our campus related to sustainability. But it can just limit a little bit of what we're able to kind of start up. So that's why I kind of put it down as an obstacle. Neyda?
Great, thanks. I get the fun one of funding, which is probably one of the most common obstacles to anything that we're doing. A lot of us don't have, we don't have direct control of the budget or the funds that we get, but having at least something to help purchase materials or to pay for honorariums can be really helpful. So you kind of have to sell what you're doing to whoever does have control of money. It's an obstacle that's just always hard to get over no matter what you're doing. In our case, we were able to get past the initial hurdle of that with some grants that we received, which we've kind of talked about. But that in itself led to its own obstacles. The paperwork and the red tape involved in getting things paid through that or reimbursed through that really was quite a headache. And one of the things that kind of bothered me the most about that was the foundation was requiring a lot of things in physical form, which not only was difficult during COVID, but it kind of felt like an obstacle for people who, are speaker in Haiti, like who might not have easy access to printers and scanners because they're in the field all day. So I felt like it was an extra barrier to that whole funding obstacle. I'm also going to talk about coordination and communication. So I kind of mentioned that the fire and flood program we did was one of the more complicated ones because there were so many moving parts, but I also think it was one of the more complicated ones because that was the one that led to the most coordination and communication challenges, which again, we all face this in everything that we do. It's hard when you have multiple people to get everybody together in meetings or to respond to emails. I think pretty much everything else that we did had maybe minor obstacles in this regard, but that one program in particular was especially challenging. I'm happy we made it through it because to lead to our next point, it was really burning me out, that obstacle in particular. So, Heather.
Okay, and finally, with all of the depressing news and so much yet to be done to save the world, it is easy to feel overwhelmed, hopeless, paralyzed, or otherwise simply burned out. Where do you even start? And so, even though you may come up against these or other obstacles yourself, the work still is important to do. So next, we would like to share a few tips and tricks that we have learned along the way to help you along. And Jen will get us started.
Yes, so one of the first things that we recommend is really learning what your campus's strengths and weaknesses are in terms of sustainability. If you have an Office of Sustainability, reaching out to them is a really good way to be able to find out that information. But if you don't, or even if you're still just interested in doing this separately, another avenue that you can go through is looking to see if your campus submits a STARS report to ASHE, which is the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education. The STARS report is just an annual report. It stands for the Sustainability Tracking, Assessment, and Rating System. And it's a self-reporting framework that colleges and universities use to measure their sustainability performance. So it has a lot of different categories that it breaks it down into, and it has a rating system associated with each of those categories. So it has things like sustainability education, sustainability research, food and dining services, buildings, alternative energy sourcing, all that kind of stuff. And it rates your campus based on those categories. There'll be like certain questions it'll ask, like, do you have this or do you have that? And that's kind of how it's determined. So it can tell you a lot about what your campus is or isn't doing, and it can help kind of guide those first initiatives that you might want to promote or start through your work in the libraries.
So I'm going to talk about just starting because it is just what you have to do. It's kind of like when you're writing, you just have to start, you just have to do it. We just a little bit of how we got started, we did spend a lot of time figuring out the strengths and weaknesses, both looking at the report that, like the STARS report that like Jen said, but just figuring out what is happening on campus, talking to people, seeing if there's already places for us to get involved. Like it took us quite a while to realize there actually wasn't already something that we could get involved with or participate with or help with. So once we made that realization, it's like, all right, well, let's just do it. How do we start? Start talking with the students. That led to other things. That laid the foundation for some things. Obviously, COVID like kind of interrupted that, but because we had started and we had something, we were able to just immediately start back up when we were able to, which like, so we were able to take, actually, okay, so talking about, I'm also going to talk about looking for grants and awards because the grants that we have received have been especially helpful with that. Like that first grant, the ALA grant, was especially helpful in taking what we had started in our sustainability corner that we were hoping to start that kind of got paused by COVID and turning it into that sustainability hub, like making it bigger and have a greater reach. But we were able to do that because we had already started making these connections and started having something laid out and ready to go. In regards to grants, two of the ones we received were from ALA. They are a great resource. There's other library organizations that give out grants and awards that can be helpful. The third one we received was an internal campus grant. So you might want to look into what your campus is providing. Now that we've done this and we're kind of, we're seeing how successful it can be, I'm kind of seeing possibilities a lot of different places. So kind of keep your eye out, see what's available, even if it's not directly for sustainability in libraries, like the first ALA grant we got. There probably are other grants you could turn into something related to that. And I'm going to start with promoting as well, just to give you a few examples of some of the things we did. I see this similar to partnerships. The more, the better. The more you can put it out there, you don't want to bother people too much, but put it out there in a variety of different ways, the better. So we collaborated with our partners and we both put things out for our different ways of doing things. On our end, we created a sign-up form so people could get email reminders for certain things. We have a separate sign-up form for our seed library. So people who are interested in specifically seed library information, they can get that or sign up for both. We sent library-wide emails to our library colleagues. We put stuff out on our campus daily update email. We, of course, promoted specific events via social media and on campus. And then I also learned that the local Sierra Club has a calendar event. So I reached out to them to see if they would also share our events, and they were very happy to do so. And they actually were very excited. And so I have hopes that they might become a future partner. Sarah?
Thanks, Neyda. So we will at SUNY Oneonta also promote a lot of our events and things on social media, on our library channel, through our partners channels. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about kind of just the sustainability work that we do and promote the good parts about promoting that. So we promote the work we do through our sustainability LibGuide, which is great because we can showcase things and put it all in one easy link. This means that we can share it in reports for annual reports for our library or at events like this, and promoting will also get you noticed. Our library won an award for our sustainability work recently. Also, promoting connects you to people who are doing the work as well. We never would have met our Binghamton colleagues, Jen and Neyda, without it. We all happen to be promoting our work at a different conference, so it was great. Also, it helps people who are on the fence about getting involved see there is stuff happening and kind of hop on over to your side of the fence. So getting a group together can be really helpful, whether it's official or unofficial, as it means you have support from each other. And also having a group shows that there is a larger interest in sustainability, which means you may be taken more seriously when approaching admin for money or, space or something. And speaking of admin support, getting your director or upper admin on board with sustainability can be very helpful. If you have some people who are not wanting to change habits, or having a director who is enthusiastic about making the library more sustainable can help overcome that obstacle. Jen, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered it really well, Sarah.
Thanks, Jen. All right, so we have pretty much finished. I just wanted to point out on our references slide here, the book, All We Can Save, Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. So this was the quotes that you saw throughout the slide. They were taken from this book. This is a fabulous anthology that features all women, many women of color, whose work is historically underrepresented in the field of sustainability. So that's my little plug for this book because I love it. I've read it and I think it's amazing. And then we'll share in a minute in the chat, but these are some resources that we wanted to highlight. We have the UN Sustainability Development Goals. I'll share that link in a minute. We also have our LibGuide and the Binghamton University LibGuide. So if you wanted to check out some of the other stuff our libraries are doing or possibly get some ideas for your own libraries, you'll have that available to you. And then we just wanted to thank you all for coming and that we hope that was informative and interesting. And we'll take the next 10 minutes to see if anyone has questions for us. And I'll stop sharing my screen so I can share those links into the chat. I know there was a couple questions coming in while we were talking.
Thank you for your presentation. I haven't seen any new questions. I know Neyda already addressed the one previously about the UN SDGs. I don't know if Oneonta has anything to add to that.
Andrea, do you incorporate / promote the UN SDGs in your sustainability programming? Yes and no. So there are a little bit we don't necessarily super highlight it, but we'll usually make kind of like an offhand comment of saying something to the effect of like, oh, this connects to this particular goal in the SDGs. Our campus in general has been really pushing that. PACs will always, even on their flyers, put out what particular goals this particular event connects to. So it's something that we're working on at Oneonta. And I know some of the work that you have done over at MCC, I believe you are, from our conference where all of us presented and met each other. And I actually think that some of the things that you have done with the SDG goals in the class has been really interesting. And I've been kind of wanting to copy that a little bit. So thanks for that presentation at the Sustainability Conference.
So I have a question. You all have collaborated with a lot of different groups and you talked about the obstacles or the difficulties with them, but what's like the most rewarding part of the experience?
I can talk for like 2 seconds. I think for me, it's working with the student groups. Like working with RAC was so much fun. It was exciting to see their passion for it, especially their passion for sustainability work, but also just how excited they were to have the library involved and to view the library as a partner in their passion for sustainability work. That was really exciting to see, and I'm super excited to keep going in that work with them in the future because I think it'll just be really great. But I think for me, it's that student work, that partnership.
I'll just also second that like working with the students has been amazing. I've really enjoyed all of that. And in regards to all of our partners, like it's every single partner that we've worked with has brought something to it. So they just have a different point of view. They have different connections. So like everything that we've done with a partner has, I think, been better than what we probably would have been able to do on our own.
Thank you. So this is from Lori. Do you see opportunities to connect and expand sustainability initiatives into the communities that surround your institutions?
I know Jen and Neyda have already done some work with that, with their ALA grant. But yeah, I feel like once you get started in this work and especially when you start taking the sustainability development goals to heart and realizing how kind of holistic that approach is to sustainability, you start realizing all the connections that are out there. And so I would like to connect and expand sustainability initiatives on our campus outside. And that for us will probably probably have to do a little bit more coordination work with Office of Sustainability because she does a lot of partnerships with communities members. So like we'll probably run through them, but I think there's a lot of opportunities to connect and expand. I don't know if Neyda and Jen, you want to talk about that even more?
Yeah, I can say that this kind of relates to the other question that you asked, Alicia, that it's similar in that I think everyone that we have talked to, that we have partnered with or ever met with, is so excited. Like just like the passion that people have for like sustainability and sustainability initiatives is just so infectious. And so a lot of this community work that Nate and I are doing, a lot of it is like a snowball effect. Like last year at this time, we were working with 0 Hour and B campus, and we were trying to get posters up in the library, and that is all that we had done. And we did the Earth Day panel. But like all of these things that we've talked about today have come in just a year of planning. I mean, we probably even only started doing that in August. So but like once you talk to one person, they're like, oh, you need to talk to this person, and it kind of keeps them going and going. And it's amazing to see that and to be a part of that and to see just the constant excitement that people have associated with this and the passion for this topic. So
I just threw in the chat that EBSCO also has a grant for putting solar panels on roofs of libraries. That was actually a little bit of how I kind of really got started in library and sustainability work. We were looking to, the Office of Sustainability wanted to apply for it, so she needed a library partner. We didn't get it because our roof is too old, but because they only put it on newer roofs. But that's something that we're actually looking for in the future when we're going to replace the roof on the library, is keeping in contact with the sustainability officer so that we can apply for this grant again to get solar panels hopefully on the roof of our library. So there are lots of grants and stuff out there. I see Claire just asked, does it need to be a standalone library? We're just one floor of our building. I don't think it needs to be a standalone library at all. We are a standalone library, but we also have about 4 or 5 different departments in our building. Like we have the Student Learning Center, the Accessibility Resources, the Geography of Environment and Environmental Sustainability Department is in our building. So we have a lot of things happening in our building that aren't necessarily library. And so I don't think that you need to have a standalone library. Oh, are you asking about the EBSCO grant? Sorry, I just realized as I was reading that question, that might be what you were doing. But yeah, I don't think it needs to be a standalone library for the EBSCO grant.
I just wanted to add, because that does remind me, and it's kind of funny because that EBSCO grant is the first sustainability grant I applied for back like at a different institution, and we didn't get it either. I don't think you have to, I'm pretty confident you don't have to be a standalone, but I wanted to mention, like when we were talking about the grants, you might like just apply for anything that you see. Like it's, that grant failure was like, yeah, we didn't get it, no big deal, but it was good experience with writing grants. And I'm still, even though we didn't get it, I'm still very happy that I have that experience and that it helped like with future grants that we were able to get.
Yeah, that's a good point, Neyda, because I feel like a lot of times with grants, you have to talk about all the sustainability initiatives that your library is doing. And so being able to kind of put a finger on it and say like, oh, this is what we're doing is really helpful for then future grants. It's a little less work in the future when you do it at the beginning.
So we have 2 minutes. Are there any last minute questions? You can also unmute yourself if you don't want to use the chat.
I'm just looking back in chat and I see Molly put the on-campus thrift store. That's awesome. Yeah, it's a really awesome little thing to have. We love having the on-campus thrift store. You can donate. It's amazing.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any more questions, I'd just like to thank the presenters again. It was a great presentation and really informative.
Thank you for having us.